Christmas morning, 10:47 a.m. I'm sitting in my childhood living room watching my father Frank wave legal documents in my face, while my mother Diana nods approvingly from her favorite recliner. "You're officially out of our will, Nikki," Frank declares with the smugness of a man who thinks he's just delivered the ultimate punishment. "We're removing every trace of you from our estate." My younger brother Tyler grins from the couch, clearly enjoying the show. But instead of breaking down or begging for forgiveness like they expected, I just smiled, because they had no idea what was coming. The silence that followed my smile stretched uncomfortably across the room. Frank's triumphant expression faltered slightly as he waited for my reaction. Diana adjusted her position in the recliner, the leather creaking under her weight, while Tyler's grin began to look forced around the edges. "That's it," Frank demanded, his voice rising an octave. "You're not even going to fight this." I leaned back in the wooden dining chair they'd given me, the same one I'd sat in during countless family dinners growing up. The irony wasn't lost on me that even now they'd relegated me to the uncomfortable seat, while Tyler sprawled across the plush sectional sofa I'd helped finance. "Fight what exactly?" I asked, my voice calm and measured. "Your decision to remove me from a will that lists assets you don't actually own." Diana's face flushed red. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, rising from the chair and straightening my navy blue sweater, "that for the past 3 years, I've been the one keeping this family afloat financially. Every single bill in this house, every payment that keeps the lights on, and the heat running every monthly mortgage installment that prevents foreclosure, it all comes from my bank account." Tyler sat up straighter, his cocky demeanor shifting slightly. "Come on, Nikki. Don't be dramatic." "Dramatic." I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. "Let me walk you through last month's expenses. Electric bill $237. Gas bill $189. Water and sewer $93. Internet and cable $212. Cell phone family plan for all 4 of us $168. Car insurance for Dad's pickup truck and Mom's sedan $326 combined. Groceries approximately $450 per week, that's $1,800 for the month." Frank's face had gone pale. "Those are family expenses. Family expenses paid by one family member." I continued scrolling through more entries. Mortgage payment $2,143. Property taxes $412. Home insurance $297. Mom's prescription medications $186 after insurance. Dad's blood pressure medication $74. And let's not forget Tyler's car payment, $308 monthly for that red Mustang sitting in our driveway. "I said I'd pay you back," Tyler muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. "When?" I asked. "You haven't worked a steady job in 18 months. Your music career consists of playing at Murphy's Bar every other Friday night for a $50 payout and free drinks. Meanwhile, you're 27 years old, living rent-free in your childhood bedroom while I cover your expenses and listen to your complaints about how hard life is." Diana finally found her voice. "You're our son. Family helps family." "You're absolutely right," I agreed, nodding slowly. "Family does help family, which is why when Dad lost his job at the warehouse during the pandemic lockdowns in March of 2021, I immediately stepped up. When your bookkeeping business collapsed because your clients couldn't afford your services anymore, I covered the gap without complaint. When you both maxed out your credit cards trying to maintain your lifestyle, I co-signed for new ones to help your credit scores recover. I walked over to the mantelpiece where family photos showed happier times. My high school graduation picture sat next to Tyler's, but mine was slightly pushed back, partially hidden behind a lamp that hadn't been there before. I moved back into this house at 29 years old, put my own life on hold, postponed, buying my own place, delayed proposing to my girlfriend Amanda, all because my family needed help. I worked 60-hour weeks at the accounting firm, took on extra freelance projects on weekends, and budgeted every dollar to make sure this household could function. Frank's hands trembled slightly as he set down the legal documents on the coffee table. "We never asked you to do all that. No, you didn't ask. You just accepted it. Every month for 3 years you accepted my support without question, without gratitude, and certainly without any acknowledgement that your comfortable lifestyle depended entirely on my income." Tyler stood up from the couch, his height advantage making him think he could intimidate me like when we were kids. "So what you want us to worship you? You want a parade because you helped out your parents. I want recognition that the son you're disowning is the same son who prevented your foreclosure 12 times. I replied evenly. "I want acknowledgement that the will you're removing me from lists assets that wouldn't exist without my financial support. This house would have been repossessed by the bank 18 months ago. Dad's truck would have been towed by the repo company. Mom wouldn't have health insurance. You, Tyler, would be living in a studio apartment somewhere, assuming you could even qualify for a lease with your credit score." Diana's voice cracked slightly. "Why are you being so cruel?" "I'm being honest," I said, turning to face her directly. "The cruelty happened 3 days ago, when Tyler stole $60 from your purse to buy drugs, and instead of holding him accountable, you believed his story that I was lying to cause trouble. The cruelty happened when I provided evidence of his theft, including security camera footage from the hardware store where he bought the pills, and Dad called me a vindictive troublemaker. The cruelty happened when I suggested Tyler needed professional help for his addiction, and you both accused me of trying to destroy this family." The room fell silent again, but this time the quiet felt heavy and oppressive. Outside, I could hear the neighbors' children playing in the snow, their laughter a sharp contrast to the tension inside our house. Here's what I realized sitting here listening to Dad read those legal papers. I continued. "You're not removing me from your will as punishment. You're doing it because Tyler convinced you I was the problem. He made you believe that your responsible, financially stable son was somehow the villain in this story, while your unemployed, drug-using 27-year-old baby boy was the innocent victim." Tyler's face darkened. "I don't use drugs. The pills you bought from Marcus behind the Ace hardware store would suggest otherwise. So would the marijuana smell that comes from your bedroom every night after 10 p.m. So would the fact that you've lost 15 pounds in 2 months and haven't been sleeping." Frank slammed his hand on the arm of his chair. "Enough, you're out of this family, Nikki. Pack your things and get out. Gladly," I said, heading towards the stairs. "But before I go, there's something else you should understand. Every utility account, every insurance policy, every service contract for this house is in my name. The electric company, the gas company, the water department, the internet provider, the cable company, they all have my information as the account holder. Your cell phones are on my family plan. Your car insurance policies list me as the primary account holder." I paused at the bottom of the staircase, my hand resting on the wooden banister that I'd helped Frank repair last summer. "When you destroyed my credit in your bankruptcy 8 years ago by listing me as a co-debtor without my knowledge, I had to rebuild everything from scratch. So when I started taking over the household bills, I couldn't add you to existing accounts because your credit scores were still too low. Everything had to be opened in my name with me as the sole responsible party." Diana's face had gone ashen. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that the son you just disowned holds complete control over every service that makes this house livable, and as of Monday morning I'll be exercising that control." Tyler laughed nervously. "You can't just turn off our electricity. That's illegal. Actually, it's completely legal when you're the account holder terminating services you no longer wish to pay for. I called my attorney yesterday to confirm." I climbed the first few steps, then turned back to look at them one more time. "You wanted to remove me from your family. Congratulations. You've succeeded. But you might want to enjoy your warm house and hot showers while you still can, because starting Tuesday morning you're going to discover exactly what it costs to maintain the lifestyle you've been taking for granted." As I walked up the stairs to pack my belongings, I could hear them arguing in heated whispers below, but their words no longer mattered to me. After 3 years of sacrifice, support, and unappreciated generosity, I was finally free. The only thing that surprised me was how good it felt. I spent the next 2 days moving my belongings into a furnished studio apartment across town, the kind of temporary housing that month-to-month leases and security deposits make possible when you have good credit and steady income. The silence of my own space felt liberating after years of Tyler's late-night phone calls, Frank's television blaring sports commentary, and Diana's habit of running the vacuum cleaner at 7 a.m. every single morning. Tuesday dawned crisp and clear, the kind of winter day that makes Minnesota beautiful despite the cold. I sat at my small dining table with a cup of coffee, and my laptop systematically calling utility companies to schedule service disconnections. Each conversation followed the same script account holder requesting termination. Effective immediately, please send final bills to my new address. The customer service representative at Minnesota Power seemed confused. Sir, our records show this account has been active for 3 years with perfect payment history. Are you sure you want to disconnect service? Completely sure, I replied, watching snowflakes drift past my window. The residents of that property are no longer my responsibility. Between utility calls, I decided to check my bank statements to ensure I had sufficient funds for my apartment deposit and first month's rent. Opening the app on my phone, I scrolled through December's transactions, looking for my salary deposits and automatic bill payments. That's when I saw them. Dozens of small withdrawals I didn't recognize scattered throughout the past 6 months. $37 here, $62 there, sometimes multiple transactions in a single day. Cash advances from ATMs I'd never visited, online payments, to companies I'd never heard of, purchases at stores I'd never shopped at. My hands trembled slightly as I calculated the total. $8,347. Gone. I immediately called my bank's fraud hotline, speaking to a security specialist named Jennifer, who walked me through the unauthorized transactions. Each withdrawal had been made using my debit card information, but the locations and timing patterns suggested someone with regular access to my personal information. Mr. Coleman, these transactions show a clear pattern of identity theft, Jennifer explained. The purchases are primarily gambling applications online, sports betting platforms, and cash advances taken during hours when you were at work. Do you have any idea who might have access to your banking information? My stomach dropped as I realized the truth. Tyler. He'd borrowed my wallet countless times over the past year, claiming he needed to check something or grab a business card. He'd helped me carry groceries from my car to the house, volunteering to grab my wallet from the center console. He'd offered to pick up my prescriptions from the pharmacy, insisting he needed my insurance card and ID. I believe I know who's responsible, I told Jennifer. What's the next step? We'll need you to come in and file formal fraud reports. We'll also need to involve law enforcement because the amount stolen exceeds $5,000, which makes this a felony under Minnesota state law. Are you prepared to press charges, Kor? I thought about Tyler's smug expression from Christmas morning, his enjoyment of my public humiliation, his complete lack of remorse for destroying our family's trust. Yes, I'm prepared to press charges. After hanging up with the bank, I sat in my quiet apartment staring at the evidence of Tyler's systematic theft. This wasn't impulsive drug money or desperate borrowing. This was calculated, sustained financial fraud carried out by someone who knew my habits, my work schedule, and my banking routines. The money Tyler had stolen wasn't just savings. It was the down payment fund I'd been building to buy my own house. It was the engagement ring money I'd set aside to propose to Amanda. It was the emergency fund I'd maintained in case my family faced a real crisis, not the manufactured drama Tyler created with his lies and manipulation. My phone buzzed with a text message from Frank. Power company says we need new account with deposit. This is ridiculous. Call them back. I deleted the message without responding. An hour later, another text from Diana. Internet not working. Tyler says you canceled everything. Very funny. Turn it back on. I deleted that one too. By afternoon, Tyler himself was calling. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his increasingly frantic messages. Dude, come on, this is going too far. Mom's freaking out because the heat won't work. Nikki, I know you're mad, but you're being childish. Just call the companies back. Look, I'm sorry about Christmas. Okay, Dad was stressed. Turn the utilities back on and we'll talk. The final message came at 6 p.m. You're being a selfish piece of garbage. When Mom gets sick because the house is cold, that's on you. I saved all the voicemails as evidence, then called Amanda to update her on the situation. $8,000. Amanda's voice reflected my own shock and anger. Nikki, he stole $8,000 from you. I should have checked my statements more carefully. I admitted. I was so focused on covering their bills that I wasn't paying attention to my own account activity. This isn't your fault, Amanda said firmly. Tyler's a grown man who committed a serious crime. Your parents chose to enable him instead of holding him accountable. You don't owe any of them anything. That evening, I received a call from Detective Sarah Walsh with the Minneapolis Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Jennifer from the bank had forwarded my fraud reports, and Detective Walsh wanted to schedule an interview for the following morning. Mr. Coleman, based on the evidence you've provided, we have probable cause to investigate Tyler Coleman for multiple felony charges, including identity theft, bank fraud, and grand theft. The gambling application purchases alone constitute a clear pattern of criminal behavior. What happens next? I asked. We'll need your formal statement copies of all unauthorized transactions and any evidence you have of Tyler's access to your personal information. If our investigation confirms intentional fraud, we'll present the case to the county attorney's office for prosecution. After hanging up, I sat in my warm, quiet apartment, watching the snow continue to fall outside. Across town, Frank, Diana, and Tyler were sitting in a cold, dark house, finally experiencing the consequences of their choices. Tomorrow, Tyler would discover that his months of theft hadn't gone unnoticed. Frank and Diana would learn that their golden child had been systematically committing felonies while they protected him from accountability. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like justice was actually possible. Wednesday morning brought a flurry of desperate phone calls from my former family. I let them all go to voicemail while I drove to the police station to provide my formal statement to Detective Walsh. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, with the kind of direct manner that made me feel confident she'd handled Tyler's case thoroughly. Your brother's gambling application purchases show a sophisticated understanding of how to avoid detection. Detective Walsh explained reviewing printouts of my bank statements. Small amounts, irregular timing, multiple platforms. This isn't amateur hour theft. Tyler always was clever when it suited his purposes, I replied. He just never applied that intelligence to anything legitimate. By the time I returned home at noon, Tyler had left 14 voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. I listened to them while eating lunch, documenting the timeline of their household crisis. Message 1, 8:30 a.m. The furnace won't start. Something's wrong with the thermostat. Message 3, 9:15 a.m. Mom called the gas company. They said the account's been closed. You need to fix this now. Message 7, 10:45 a.m. Dad tried to open a new gas account. They want a $400 deposit because of his credit score. This is insane. Message 12, 11:30. Mom's crying. She's trying to heat the house with the oven, which is dangerous. Just call them back. The final message recorded 20 minutes ago had a different tone entirely. I know what you're doing. You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what you've started. While I was deleting Tyler's threats, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Is this Nikki Coleman? The voice belonged to an older woman, somewhat familiar, but not immediately recognizable. Yes, who's calling? This is Janet Morrison, your mother's sister. Diana called me this morning, very upset, saying you'd turned off their utilities over some family disagreement. I wanted to hear your side before getting involved. Aunt Janet. Diana's older sister, the responsible one who'd married a successful insurance agent and raised 3 productive children. She'd always been polite to me at family gatherings, but we'd never had personal conversations. It's more complicated than a disagreement, I said carefully. I've been supporting their household financially for 3 years, and on Christmas Day they officially disowned me. So I stopped paying for services I was no longer welcome to provide. Janet was quiet for a moment. Diana mentioned you'd been helping with some bills. Helping? I couldn't keep the bitter laugh out of my voice. Janet, I've been covering their entire mortgage, all utilities, car insurance, groceries, medical expenses, and Tyler's car payment for 3 years. They were facing foreclosure when I moved back home. Another pause. I had no idea the situation was that extensive. There's something else you should know. I continued, deciding that honesty was the best approach. Tyler's been stealing money from my bank account for months. I'm pressing criminal charges for fraud and identity theft. Oh my God, Janet whispered. Nikki, I need to tell you something. Tyler called me 2 weeks ago asking for money. He said Frank and Diana were financially abusing him, taking his paychecks, and not letting him have any independence. I sent him $500. My heart sank. Janet, Tyler hasn't had a paycheck in over a year. Whatever story he told you was a lie designed to manipulate you into giving him money. That little… Janet caught herself. How much has he stolen from you? Over $8,000 that I can prove, possibly more. The silence stretched for nearly a minute before Janet spoke again. Nikki, I owe you an apology. Diana's been telling our whole family that you were being selfish and ungrateful, refusing to help during their financial difficulties. She made it sound like you'd abandoned them in their time of need. The opposite is true, I said. I sacrificed my own financial goals to keep their household running. They disowned me because I tried to hold Tyler accountable for drug use and theft. I'm going to drive over there right now, Janet said. This needs to be straightened out immediately. After Janet hung up, I felt a mix of validation and sadness. Diana had been actively lying to extended family members, painting me as the villain, while portraying Tyler as the victim. How many relatives believed I'd cruelly abandoned my parents during a crisis? My phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed Frank's number. Nikki, we need to talk, Frank said without preamble. Your mother's sister is here asking questions about Tyler and money. What did you tell her? I told her the truth. The truth? Frank's voice rose. You're spreading lies about your brother to the whole family. I'm documenting felony crimes committed by Tyler against me personally. Janet asked for my perspective and I gave it to her honestly. Janet says you're accusing Tyler of stealing $8,000. That's ridiculous. It's documented bank fraud, Dad. The police are investigating. Detective Sarah Walsh with financial crimes has all the evidence. The line went quiet for so long I thought Frank had hung up. Police, he finally whispered. Tyler used my debit card information to make unauthorized withdrawals for 6 months. That's identity theft and grand larceny under Minnesota law. He's facing serious federal charges. You called the police on your own brother. I reported crimes committed against me to the appropriate authorities. Tyler called the police on himself when he decided to steal my money. Frank hung up without another word. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Janet. Diana and Frank are scrambling to call Tyler back home. He apparently left the house after I started asking specific questions about the money situation. Diana's admitting she knew Tyler borrowed money from you, but claims she thought it was legitimate loans. Frank's trying to contact his lawyer. I replied, "Thank you for seeking the truth. Tyler's lawyer will be more important than Frank's." Another text arrived quickly. Diana wants to know if you'll consider dropping the charges if Tyler pays the money back. I stared at that message for a long time before responding. Tyler doesn't have $8,000 to pay back. He stole it and spent it on gambling. The only thing he has to offer is accountability for his choices. Janet's final text came an hour later. Diana's crying. She says she can't believe Tyler would lie to her. Frank's calling everyone in the family trying to find out who else Tyler might have stolen from. I think reality is finally setting in. That evening I sat in my comfortable, warm apartment listening to the heat cycle on and off automatically. I thought about Frank, Diana, and Tyler bundling up in blankets, trying to stay warm in a house that was rapidly losing heat. I thought about them discovering the depth of Tyler's deception, the scope of his manipulation, and the criminal consequences of protecting him from accountability. For the first time since Christmas morning, I felt something approaching peace. Justice wasn't just about punishment. Sometimes it was about truth finally surfacing after being buried under years of lies, manipulation, and willful blindness. And sometimes truth was the most powerful weapon of all. Thursday brought developments I hadn't anticipated. I was reviewing quarterly reports at my office when Detective Walsh called with an update. "Mr. Coleman, we executed a search warrant on Tyler's personal belongings this morning. We found evidence of fraud against multiple victims, including an elderly neighbor named Ruth Peterson, who lives 2 streets over from your parents' house." My stomach tightened. "What kind of fraud?" "Tyler befriended Mrs. Peterson 6 months ago, offering to help with yard work and grocery shopping. He convinced her to let him use her credit card for online purchases, claiming he was buying medical supplies she needed. We found over $3,000 in unauthorized charges. $3,000 from an elderly woman." I felt sick thinking about Ruth Peterson, a widow in her 80s who lived alone and survived on Social Security. "It gets worse," Detective Walsh continued. "Tyler also used your personal information to apply for credit cards from 2 different companies. The applications were submitted online using your Social Security number, but with his address for delivery. He's accumulated nearly $6,000 in debt using your identity." I sat down heavily in my office chair. "So the total damage is over $17,000 that we've discovered so far. We're still investigating. Tyler's not just a family problem anymore, Mr. Coleman. This is organized financial fraud affecting multiple victims. The federal prosecutor's office is taking over the case." After hanging up, I stared out my office window at the bustling downtown Minneapolis street below. Tyler hadn't just stolen from me. He'd built an entire criminal operation around identity theft and elder abuse. Mrs. Peterson was probably struggling to pay for medications while Tyler used her money for gambling and drugs. My phone buzzed with a call from Janet. "Nikki, something terrible has happened. Diana's in the emergency room." "What is she hurt?" "She collapsed at work this morning. The doctors think it's a panic attack combined with stress and exhaustion. She hasn't been sleeping or eating properly since the utilities were shut off." I felt a pang of guilt, quickly followed by anger. Janet, Diana's health problems aren't caused by cold temperatures. They're caused by 3 years of stress from covering for Tyler's destructive behavior while denying reality. "I know that now," Janet said quietly. "I spent yesterday evening at their house asking questions. Nikki, the situation is so much worse than I realized. Tyler's been lying to all of us for years." "What did you discover? Remember when I told you Tyler asked me for $500 2 weeks ago? Well, I did some checking. He's been calling relatives for months, telling different stories to different people. He told my husband, Doug, that Frank had cancer and needed help with medical bills. He told Diana's cousin Martha that you'd been stealing family money and they needed help buying groceries. He told my daughter Lisa that Diana was being evicted and needed rent money." My head started pounding. "How much did he steal from the extended family?" "Over $12,000 that we can confirm. Maybe more. We're still making phone calls." "Janet, you need to know that Tyler's situation is much more serious than family drama. The police found evidence he's been committing fraud against multiple people, including an elderly neighbor. He's facing federal charges." The line went quiet for a long moment. "Federal charges, identity theft, elder abuse, bank fraud. Tyler's built a criminal enterprise around stealing money from vulnerable people. This isn't drug addiction or family dysfunction anymore. He's a predator." Janet started crying. "Diana doesn't know yet. She keeps saying Tyler just made some mistakes, that he's a good boy who needs help. Frank's still trying to protect him. Where is Tyler now? That's the thing. Nobody knows. He disappeared yesterday after you called the police. Frank and Diana think he's staying with friends, but I suspect he knows the investigation is closing in." After Janet hung up, I sat in my office trying to process the scope of Tyler's criminal behavior. He hadn't just stolen from me. He'd systematically exploited every relationship in our extended family, using emotional manipulation and fabricated crises to extract money from people who trusted him. My phone rang again. This time it was Amanda. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "I'm discovering that Tyler's crimes extend far beyond stealing from me. He's hurt a lot of innocent people." "That's not your fault, Nikki. You tried to get your parents to see the truth about Tyler months ago." "I know, but I still feel responsible. If I'd pushed harder for accountability earlier, maybe Mrs. Peterson wouldn't have been victimized. Tyler made his choices, Amanda said firmly. You can't protect the whole world from his manipulation. You can only control your own actions, and you've done the right thing by reporting his crimes. That evening, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. Frank stood in my hallway looking older and more defeated than I'd ever seen him. His usually neat appearance was disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. Can we talk? He asked quietly. I let him in, noticing how he seemed diminished in my small living space. The confident, domineering father I'd known my whole life had been replaced by a broken man who couldn't make eye contact. Diana's in the hospital, he said, settling heavily into my single armchair. Janet told me. Panic attack. The doctors say it's severe anxiety and exhaustion. She hasn't been able to sleep since Christmas. The cold house, Tyler disappearing, Janet asking all those questions about money. It finally caught up with her. Frank looked around my apartment, taking in the comfortable temperature, the functioning lights, the peaceful atmosphere. You were right, he said finally. About Tyler. About everything. What changed your mind? Janet showed me bank statements. Tyler's been stealing from family members for over a year. Martha dug Lisa, even Diana's elderly cousin Paul, who's on a fixed income. He told them all different stories, made us all look like villains who wouldn't help our own family. Frank's voice broke slightly. He told Martha that you'd stolen Diana's inheritance money, and we were too ashamed to ask for help directly. He told Doug that I'd been gambling away our savings, and Diana was afraid to admit it. Every story made someone in this family look like a monster so Tyler could play the victim. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Are you... Frank looked at me directly for the first time. Because I wouldn't blame you for enjoying watching us fall apart. We treated you terribly. I considered his question seriously. I'm not enjoying watching you suffer, Dad. I'm relieved that the truth is finally coming out. There's a difference. The police came by the house this afternoon. They have a warrant for Tyler's arrest. Federal charges, they said. Identity theft, elder abuse, and bank fraud. Tyler's been running criminal schemes against multiple victims. Frank aged 10 years in front of my eyes. My son is a criminal. Your son made criminal choices, I corrected. But he made those choices because he knew you and Mom would protect him from consequences, no matter what he did wrong. You tried to tell us. You tried to warn us months ago. I tried to get you to see that Tyler needed real help, not enabling. Drug addiction and stealing money aren't character flaws you can love away. They're serious problems that require professional intervention and accountability. Frank sat in silence for several minutes, staring at his hands. Diana wants to see you, he said finally. She's asking for you at the hospital. What does she want to say? I don't know. But Nikki, she's been crying for 2 days straight. She keeps saying she destroyed our family by choosing Tyler over you. I looked at my father. This man who'd raised me, taught me to ride a bike, helped me with homework, attended my baseball games and graduation ceremonies. Despite everything that had happened, despite the disowning and the cruel words, he was still my father. And for the first time in years, he seemed to be seeing clearly. I'll visit her tomorrow, I said. But Dad, I need you to understand something. I'm not coming back to save this family from the consequences of enabling Tyler. I'm not going to resume paying bills or fixing problems you created by refusing to hold him accountable. That part of my life is over. Frank nodded slowly. I understand. We have to learn to take care of ourselves. Can you take care of yourselves? I don't know, he admitted. But we're going to have to figure it out. After Frank left, I sat alone in my warm apartment thinking about Diana, lying in a hospital bed, finally facing the reality she'd spent years avoiding. Tomorrow I would go see her, not as the dutiful son who sacrificed his own needs for family peace, but as an independent adult who'd learned that love without boundaries becomes destruction. The truth had finally set us all free, even if freedom turned out to be more painful than anyone had expected. Friday morning's news hit like a sledgehammer. I was getting dressed for work when Detective Walsh called with an update that changed everything. Tyler Coleman was arrested at 6 a.m. this morning at a motel in Bloomington. He'd been hiding there for 3 days, apparently trying to figure out how to flee the state. Is he in custody now? He's being processed at the Hennepin County Jail. But Mr. Coleman, there's something else. During his arrest interview, Tyler provided information about additional crimes to try negotiating a plea deal. He's admitted to defrauding Mrs. Peterson, but he also revealed that your father has been working unreported cash jobs while collecting unemployment benefits. My blood ran cold. What kind of cash jobs? Construction work, home repairs, handyman services. Tyler says Frank has been earning between $800 and $1,200 per month in unreported income while still filing for unemployment compensation. That's federal unemployment fraud, which carries serious penalties. I sat down on my bed feeling like the world was spinning out of control. How long has this been going on? According to Tyler's statement since Frank lost his warehouse job in 2021. If Tyler's telling the truth, your father has committed unemployment fraud totaling over $30,000. After Detective Walsh hung up, I called my office to request a personal day, then drove directly to Minneapolis General Hospital, where Diana was being treated. I found her in a private room, looking small and fragile in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors that tracked her blood pressure and heart rate. "Nikki," she whispered when she saw me. "You came." I pulled a chair close to her bed. "How are you feeling?" "Terrible, scared, ashamed." Diana's eyes filled with tears. "Janet told me about Tyler stealing from everyone. And this morning Frank got a call from someone at the unemployment office asking about an investigation. Mom, there's something else you need to know. Tyler was arrested this morning." Diana's monitors started beeping faster as her heart rate spiked. "Arrested? Where is he hurt?" "He's fine physically. He's being held on federal charges related to the fraud and theft." But Diana, Tyler told investigators about Dad's unreported work income while collecting unemployment benefits. The color drained from Diana's already pale face. "Oh God, Frank's in trouble too. Unemployment fraud is a serious federal crime. If Tyler's information is accurate, Dad could face prosecution and have to repay everything he collected illegally." Diana closed her eyes and started sobbing, her whole body shaking with the force of her grief. A nurse appeared in the doorway, checking the alarm from her monitors, but I waved her away, indicating that Diana was emotionally upset, but not in medical danger. "I destroyed everything," Diana whispered between sobs. "I destroyed our family by protecting Tyler instead of helping him. I lost my responsible, caring son because I couldn't admit my baby was becoming a criminal. You didn't destroy anything that couldn't be rebuilt," I said carefully. "But rebuilding requires honesty about what went wrong. Tyler's been lying to me for years, hasn't he? The job interviews that never happened, the friends who needed help with money, the emergencies that required cash. None of it was real." "None of it was real," I confirmed. "Tyler learned that he could manipulate your love for him to avoid consequences for his choices. Every time he got into trouble, you and Dad fixed it for him, instead of letting him face the results of his behavior." Diana opened her eyes and looked at me directly. "When did I stop being a good mother? You were always a good mother who loved her children. But somewhere along the way, you started thinking that protecting Tyler from consequences was the same thing as protecting him from harm. It's not. Sometimes consequences are how people learn to make better choices. I lost you because I couldn't see the truth about Tyler. You didn't lose me because of Tyler. You lost me because when forced to choose between enabling his destructive behavior and supporting my efforts to help him get clean and accountable, you chose enabling." A doctor appeared in the doorway, a middle-aged woman in a white coat who introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Chen. "Mrs. Coleman, your test results show elevated stress hormones and signs of chronic anxiety. Have you been experiencing ongoing stressful situations at home?" Diana looked at me, then back at the doctor. "My family is falling apart because of choices I made. My youngest son is in jail for stealing money from elderly people. My oldest son had to move out because I chose to believe lies instead of protecting him from his brother's theft. My husband might be going to prison for unemployment fraud." Dr. Chen's expression remained professionally neutral, but I could see her processing the scope of Diana's crisis. "Mrs. Coleman, acute stress reactions like yours require both medical treatment and psychological support. I'm going to recommend you speak with our social worker about resources for family crisis counseling." Your body is reacting to trauma, and healing will require addressing both the physical symptoms and the underlying emotional issues. After Dr. Chen left Diana, and I sat in silence for several minutes, listening to the steady beeping of her monitors and the distant sounds of hospital activity in the hallway. Nikki, is there any way Tyler can avoid prison? Mom, Tyler didn't just steal money from me. He systematically defrauded multiple victims, including an 80-year-old woman who trusted him to help with her shopping. He used my identity to open credit cards. He manipulated family members across 3 states to send him money under false pretenses. This isn't a mistake or a lapse in judgment. It's organized criminal behavior. But he's sick. He needs help, not prison. He needs both. Tyler has demonstrated that he can't control his behavior without external constraints. Prison might be the only thing that forces him to face reality about his choices. Diana turned her face towards the window, watching clouds move across the gray January sky. I keep thinking about when Tyler was little, she said quietly. He was such a sweet child. Funny, creative, always making up stories and entertaining people. When did those stories turn into lies? When did his creativity turn into manipulation? I don't know when it started, I admitted. But I know it escalated because every time he got caught lying or stealing, you and Dad found ways to excuse his behavior instead of addressing it directly. We thought we were protecting him. You were protecting yourselves from having to admit that your baby wasn't the person you wanted him to be. Diana's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and her face crumpled again. Frank's been arrested, she whispered. Janet just texted me. Federal agents came to the house with a warrant. I felt a sharp stab of sympathy for my father despite everything that had happened between us. Frank wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was a desperate man who'd made increasingly poor choices while trying to maintain his pride and avoid admitting financial failure. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Did you know about Dad's unreported work income? Diana was quiet for a long time, her monitors beeping steadily in the background. I knew, she finally admitted. He told me the unemployment payments weren't enough to cover our bills, so we had to find other ways to earn money. He said everyone did it, that the government expected people to find work under the table while they looked for legitimate employment. Did you know it was illegal? I suspected it might be, but Frank said we didn't have choices, that we had to survive somehow. Diana's voice got smaller. Just like I suspected Tyler might be using drugs, but I convinced myself it was just experimentation or stress relief. You convinced yourself of a lot of things that weren't true. I convinced myself of whatever I needed to believe to avoid dealing with problems that seemed too big to handle. We sat together in the hospital room as afternoon faded into evening. Diana slowly coming to terms with the complete collapse of the family structure she'd spent years trying to preserve through denial and enabling. Outside her window, snow began falling again, covering Minneapolis in a fresh layer of white that made everything look clean and peaceful. But inside the room, there was only the hard work of facing reality after years of living in carefully constructed lies. For the first time since Christmas morning, I felt genuinely sorry for my parents. Not because they didn't deserve consequences for their choices, but because learning the truth about people you love is always painful, even when that truth finally sets you free. Frank was released from federal custody on a $20,000 bond 3 days later, but the damage to our family's reputation in the community was irreversible. By the following week, everyone in our neighborhood knew that both Coleman's sons had been arrested for federal crimes, and Diana was struggling with the shame of walking past neighbors who'd once respected our family. I learned about Frank's release from Janet, who'd become my primary source of information about my parents' situation. Diana had been discharged from the hospital with anxiety medications and strict instructions to avoid stress, which seemed impossible given their circumstances. Frank's convinced he can fight the charges. Janet told me during a coffee meeting at a downtown Minneapolis cafe. He hired a lawyer named Robert Martinez, who's apparently giving him false hope about avoiding prison time. What kind of false hope? Martinez told Frank that unemployment fraud cases are often resolved with restitution and probation, especially for first-time offenders. But he didn't tell Frank about the $30,000 restitution requirement, plus penalties and legal fees. I stirred my coffee slowly, thinking about Frank's desperate situation. Frank doesn't have $30,000. He doesn't have $3,000. That's not the worst part, Janet continued. Martinez also told Frank that he might have legal grounds to force you to provide financial support as his adult child, since you'd been helping voluntarily for 3 years. I nearly choked on my coffee. What? Frank's convinced himself that because you were paying their bills for 3 years, some kind of legal dependency was established that creates ongoing obligations. Martinez apparently didn't discourage this thinking because he wants to keep collecting legal fees. That's completely ridiculous. Adult children have no legal obligation to support their parents unless the parents are genuinely incapacitated and have no other resources. I tried to tell Frank that, but he's desperate. He's facing foreclosure within 60 days restitution payments he can't afford, and the possibility of federal prison. He's grasping at any solution that doesn't require him to take full responsibility for his choices. That afternoon, my worst fears were confirmed when I received a certified letter from Robert Martinez's law office. The letter claimed that I had established a pattern of financial dependency by providing household support for 3 years, and that discontinuing this support without proper legal notice had caused irreparable harm to Frank and Diana's financial stability. The letter demanded that I resume paying their household expenses until they could achieve financial independence through legitimate means, and threatened legal action if I refused to comply within 10 business days. I immediately called my own attorney, Lisa Richardson, who'd handled my apartment lease and helped me understand my rights when I'd terminated the utility services. "Nikki, this letter is legal nonsense," Lisa said after reviewing Martinez's demands. "There's no such thing as financial dependency rights for adult parents who aren't disabled or incapacitated. Your father's lawyer is either incompetent or deliberately misleading him." "Can Frank actually sue me?" "He can file a lawsuit, but it would be frivolous and likely to result in sanctions against his attorney. More importantly, Frank's position is completely undermined by the fact that you were providing support voluntarily while living in their home. You weren't a tenant paying rent. You were a family member contributing to household expenses. What should I do about Martinez's threat? Nothing. Let me draft a response explaining why his legal theory is baseless and warning him that pursuing frivolous litigation could result in professional sanctions. Frank's desperate, but his desperation doesn't create legal obligations for you." While Lisa handled the legal response, Frank escalated his pressure campaign. He started calling my workplace, claiming family emergencies, and demanding to speak with me immediately. When my assistant explained that I was unavailable, Frank accused my company of enabling financial elder abuse and threatened to contact my professional licensing board. Frank also began showing up at my apartment building, waiting in the lobby, and trying to intercept me when I came home from work. The building manager, Mrs. Patterson, called me one evening to report that Frank had been loitering with intent and asking other residents about my personal schedule. "Mr. Coleman, I don't want to call the police, but your father's behavior is making other residents uncomfortable. He was here for 3 hours yesterday asking people if they knew when you usually came home." I thanked Mrs. Patterson for her patience and called Frank directly, hoping to resolve the situation before it escalated further. "Dad, you need to stop coming to my apartment building and calling my workplace. This behavior is inappropriate and it's not helping your legal situation." "You destroyed my life," Frank said, his voice raw with desperation. "You called the police on Tyler, you cut off our utilities, you abandoned us when we needed help most. Now you're letting us lose our house while you live comfortably in your fancy apartment." "Dad, my apartment costs $800 a month and has 400 square feet. It's not fancy. And I didn't destroy your life. I stopped subsidizing the lifestyle you'd been maintaining through unemployment fraud and enabling Tyler's criminal behavior." "Tyler made mistakes, but he's still my son. Family doesn't abandon family. Family doesn't systematically steal from family either. Tyler committed serious crimes against multiple victims. He's not a troubled kid who needs help. He's an adult criminal who needs to face consequences." Frank was quiet for a moment, and I could hear Diana's voice in the background, too muffled to understand her words. "Your mother wants to talk to you," Frank said finally. "Nikki." Diana's voice sounded stronger than it had in the hospital, but still fragile. "Will you please just consider helping us avoid foreclosure? We don't need you to move back or pay all our bills, just enough to keep the house until Frank's legal situation is resolved." "Mom, Frank's legal situation will be resolved with him owing $30,000 in restitution, plus legal fees and penalties. Helping you avoid foreclosure now would just delay the inevitable financial collapse while depleting my savings further." "But this house is our life. It's where we raised you and Tyler. It's where all our memories are. And it's also a financial obligation you can't afford without my income. Mom, you and Dad need to downsize to something within your budget, find employment you can handle physically, and build a sustainable lifestyle based on your actual earning potential. You're asking us to give up everything. I'm asking you to accept reality. The lifestyle you've been maintaining was only possible because I was subsidizing it. Now that I'm gone, you need to adjust your expenses to match your income." Diana started crying again. "Tyler's lawyer says he might get 15 years in federal prison if he's convicted on all charges. Tyler's lawyer is probably right. Elder fraud, identity theft, and bank fraud are serious federal crimes. He's 27 years old, Nikki. 15 years would destroy his life. Tyler destroyed his own life when he chose to steal from vulnerable people instead of getting help for his addictions. And Mom, Tyler destroyed other people's lives too. Mrs. Peterson is now afraid to trust anyone who offers help because Tyler manipulated her kindness. The family members he lied to feel betrayed and embarrassed. His choices had consequences for innocent people." Frank took the phone back. "So you're just going to let your brother rot in prison? I'm going to let Tyler face the consequences of his criminal choices. There's a difference. And you're going to let us lose our house? I'm going to let you experience the natural consequences of financial decisions you made without consulting me. Dad, you committed unemployment fraud for almost 3 years. You chose to enable Tyler's destructive behavior instead of getting him professional help. You chose to disown me on Christmas morning. Now you're experiencing the results of those choices." Frank hung up without saying goodbye. That evening, I sat in my small apartment looking through rental listings for smaller, cheaper housing options that might suit Frank and Diana's actual budget. Despite everything they'd done, despite their continued refusal to take responsibility for their situation, I still felt sad watching my parents struggle with the collapse of their comfortable illusions. But feeling sad didn't mean I was obligated to rescue them from the consequences of their own choices. For the first time in my adult life, I was learning the difference between loving someone and enabling their destructive behavior. It was a painful lesson, but a necessary one. 6 months later, everything had changed in ways I never could have anticipated. Diana's letter arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in July, forwarded to my new address in St. Paul, where I'd moved after getting promoted to senior accountant at a growing financial consulting firm. The envelope was handwritten in Diana's careful script, addressed simply to Nikki Coleman, with no return address. Inside was a 3-page letter written on simple notebook paper, the kind Diana used for grocery lists when I was growing up. Her handwriting was shaky in places, as if she'd been crying while writing, but the words were clear and deliberate. "Dear Nikki," the letter began. "I'm writing this letter because I finally understand the difference between being sorry I got caught and being sorry for what I did wrong. For most of your life, I was sorry when my choices created consequences I didn't like, but I was never sorry enough to change my behavior. I'm writing to tell you that I understand now why you had to leave, why you had to stop enabling our family's dysfunction, and why Tyler is in prison where he belongs." Diana went on to explain that she and Frank had lost the house to foreclosure in March and moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a subsidized housing complex for seniors. Frank had been sentenced to 18 months of probation and ordered to repay $28,000 in unemployment fraud restitution. Tyler had pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges and received 12 years in prison with possibility of parole after 8 years. I want you to know that I no longer make excuses for Tyler's crimes, Diana wrote. I spent 3 months going to counseling with a social worker named Patricia Williams, who helped me understand that I wasn't protecting Tyler by denying his problems. I was enabling him to hurt more people. Mrs. Peterson, our neighbor, who Tyler stole from, she's in a nursing home now because Tyler's theft made her afraid to live alone. That sweet old lady is in institutional care because I raised a son who learned he could manipulate kindness for personal gain. The letter continued with specific details about Diana's new life. She was working part-time at a grocery store, earning $9 per hour plus benefits. Frank worked at a hardware store, making $11 per hour. Together, they earned just enough to cover their basic expenses in the subsidized apartment. I know this letter doesn't earn me forgiveness, Diana wrote. I know saying I'm sorry doesn't undo the years of emotional damage I caused by choosing Tyler's lies over your truth. But I needed you to know that your decision to cut off our utilities and force us to face reality was the kindest thing anyone has ever done for our family. I hated you for it at the time, but it saved my life. Diana explained that Frank had initially blamed me for destroying the family, but had gradually come to understand that I hadn't destroyed anything. I had simply stopped maintaining the artificial structure that was enabling Tyler's criminal behavior and Frank's fraud. Your father wants to write you a letter too, Diana continued, but he's afraid you'll think he's trying to manipulate you into resuming contact before he's earned it. Frank's in therapy now, learning about his role in creating the problems that led to Tyler's criminal behavior. He's ashamed of the unemployment fraud, not just because he got caught, but because he understands that he taught Tyler that lying and stealing were acceptable solutions to financial problems. The final page of Diana's letter was the hardest to read. I don't expect you to want a relationship with us again, she wrote. I understand if the damage I caused by protecting Tyler is too severe to repair. But if there's ever a possibility of rebuilding trust between us, I want you to know that I'm finally the mother I should have been years ago. I see clearly now. I take responsibility for my choices now. I choose truth over comfortable lies now. Diana ended the letter by saying she'd enclosed my grandmother's wedding ring, the one that had been promised to my future wife, since I was a teenager. This belongs with you and Amanda, she wrote. I hope you'll use it to build the healthy family that your father and I failed to create. The small velvet box fell out of the letter when I unfolded the last page. Inside was Grandma Coleman's simple gold band, with a small diamond, the ring my grandfather had bought in 1947 when he proposed. Diana had always said it would be mine when I was ready to get married. I sat, holding the letter and the ring for over an hour, watching the summer sun set through my apartment windows. Amanda was working late at her nursing job, but I knew she'd want to hear about this development when she got home. For 6 months, I'd built a new life based on healthy boundaries and honest relationships. My job was challenging and rewarding. My relationship with Amanda had deepened into something strong and stable. I'd made new friends who knew me as an independent adult, not as the son who sacrificed his own goals to maintain family dysfunction. But I'd also missed my parents. Not the people who'd disowned me on Christmas morning, but the parents who'd raised me, who'd taught me values and ethics, who'd been loving and supportive before Tyler's problems consumed their judgment. Diana's letter suggested that those people still existed, buried under years of bad choices, but not destroyed by them. I called Amanda at work, reaching her during her dinner break. She's taking full responsibility, Amanda asked after I'd read her significant portions of the letter. Complete responsibility. She's not asking for anything, not even contact. She's just telling me that she understands what went wrong and why I had to leave. How do you feel about that? Surprised, relieved, cautiously hopeful. I looked at the wedding ring sitting on my coffee table. Amanda, I think Diana's finally become the person she was capable of being before Tyler's manipulation consumed her judgment. What do you want to do about it? I want to call her, not to resume the old relationship where I financially supported them, but to see if there's possibility for a new relationship based on honesty and mutual respect. That sounds healthy, Amanda agreed. But Nikki, You need to be prepared for the possibility that this growth is temporary. People under stress sometimes say what they think others want to hear. I know. That's why I want to start slowly with clear boundaries about what kind of relationship is possible. That evening, I wrote Diana a response letter. I thanked her for taking responsibility for her choices and acknowledged her growth and insight. I told her about my promotion, my new apartment, and my relationship with Amanda. I mentioned that I was considering proposing to Amanda using Grandma's ring, but I also established clear boundaries for any future contact. I explained that I would never again provide financial support for Frank and Diana's household expenses. I clarified that Tyler would not be welcome in my home or at family gatherings if I chose to resume limited contact. I emphasized that any relationship going forward would be based on honesty, mutual respect, and healthy boundaries. I'm willing to explore rebuilding trust between us. I wrote, but it will require consistent demonstration that you've learned to choose truth over comfortable lies, accountability over enabling, and respect over manipulation. This isn't a test you can pass quickly. It's a lifestyle change that will need to be sustained over time. 2 weeks later, Diana called me. Our conversation was careful, respectful, and honest. She asked about my work and my relationship with Amanda. I asked about her job at the grocery store and Frank's progress in therapy. We talked for 20 minutes without mentioning money utilities or Tyler's situation. It felt like talking to my mother for the first time in years. 3 months later, Amanda and I visited Diana and Frank in their small apartment. The space was clean and modest, furnished with items from thrift stores and garage sales. Frank looked older and humbler, but also more honest than I'd seen him since my childhood. Diana seemed smaller and sadder, but also more present and authentic. We spent 2 hours together sharing a simple dinner that Diana had prepared with ingredients she could afford on her grocery store salary. Frank asked about my work with genuine interest, not as a prelude to financial requests. Diana admired Amanda's nursing school stories and asked thoughtful questions about our relationship. Nobody mentioned Tyler. Nobody mentioned the house they'd lost. Nobody mentioned the money I'd spent supporting them or the bills I'd once paid. We talked like adults who respected each other, who were interested in each other's lives, who could be together without manipulation or hidden agendas. When we left that evening, Diana hugged me goodbye. "Thank you for giving us a chance to show you we're different now. Thank you for becoming different," I replied. The following month, I proposed to Amanda using Grandma's ring. She said yes, and we began planning a small wedding for the following spring. Diana and Frank would be invited, but with clear understanding that their attendance depended on their continued commitment to honest, respectful behavior. Tyler would not be invited. Tyler would not be part of our future family, not because I couldn't forgive him for stealing money, but because he'd never shown genuine remorse for the harm he'd caused to vulnerable people like Mrs. Peterson. As I write this story, it's been almost a year since that Christmas morning confrontation that changed everything. Diana and Frank are still living in their small apartment, still working their modest jobs, still attending counseling to address the thinking patterns that led to their enabling behavior. Tyler is still in federal prison and will remain there for several more years. The family we have now isn't the family we were before Tyler's crimes exploded our comfortable illusions. But it's an honest family, a respectful family, a family based on authentic relationships instead of financial dependency and emotional manipulation. Sometimes love means saying no to people you care about. Sometimes protecting someone requires letting them experience the consequences of their choices. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their destructive behavior, even when they hate you for it. The utilities I cut off that December morning weren't just electricity and gas. They were the artificial life support that was keeping a dysfunctional family system alive. When I finally turned off that life support, it forced everyone to either learn to function healthily or collapse completely. Diana and Frank learned to function healthily. Tyler collapsed, and for the first time in years that felt like justice. I learned that you can't save people from themselves, but you can stop participating in their destruction. I learned that enabling someone's bad choices isn't kindness, it's cruelty disguised as love. I learned that real family loyalty means holding each other accountable for growth, not protecting each other from consequences. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the people who love you most will try to destroy your boundaries in the name of family loyalty. Learning to say no to that manipulation isn't selfish. It's the foundation of healthy relationships. When someone shows you who they are through their choices, believe them. When someone asks you to sacrifice your well-being to enable their dysfunction, choose yourself. When someone demands that you set yourself on fire to keep them warm, hand them a sweater and walk away. The people who truly love you will learn to respect your boundaries. The people who only loved what you could provide for them will reveal their true nature when you stop providing it. Either way, you'll finally know where you stand. Have you ever had to choose between enabling someone you love and protecting yourself from their destructive choices? How did you find the courage to set boundaries with family members who refused to respect them? Share your story in the comments below, and remember that you're not alone in facing these difficult decisions. If this story resonated with your own experiences with family dysfunction or enabled destructive behavior, please like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in impossible situations. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that choosing themselves over family manipulation isn't selfish. It's survival. Thank you for listening. And remember, the people who truly belong in your life will rise to meet your boundaries, not try to tear them down. Your peace is worth protecting, even when protecting it means disappointing people who claim to love you. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's destruction, even when they hate you for it. Choose your own well-being, and let others choose theirs.